The cherry blossoms were at their peak that spring morning in the 18th year of the Jinroku era, their delicate pink petals floating like whispered secrets through the meticulously maintained gardens of the Matsudaira estate. I had risen before dawn, as was my custom, to tend to the morning rituals that bound our household together in the intricate dance of samurai propriety. The air carried the faint scent of incense from the family shrine, mingling with the sweet fragrance of sakura, creating an atmosphere that should have brought peace to my troubled heart. My name is Yukiko, and I was the youngest daughter-in-law in one of the most respected samurai families serving the Tokugawa shogunate. Our domain stretched across fertile rice paddies and ancient pine forests in what would one day be called Shizuoka Prefecture, but in those days, we knew only that we served the great shogun Tsuneyoshi with unwavering loyalty, our family's honor stretching back 7 generations to the earliest days of the Edo period. The morning routine was sacred in our household. Each movement, each gesture, had been refined over decades of tradition. I would rise before the others, light the braziers, prepare the first tea ceremony materials, and ensure that every tatami mat lay perfectly aligned, every shoji screen slid seamlessly in its grooves. This was not mere housework. It was the physical manifestation of our family's spiritual discipline, the way we honored our ancestors and maintained the delicate harmony that kept our world in perfect balance. But that morning, as I knelt beside the ornamental pond adjusting the placement of carefully arranged stones, I heard voices drifting from behind the carefully pruned azalea bushes. The voices belonged to my sisters-in-law, Sachiko and Mariko, and something in their tone made me freeze. My hands still submerged in the cool water where golden koi swam in lazy circles, oblivious to the human drama unfolding above them. "The time has come," Sachiko was saying, her voice carrying the authority of the eldest daughter-in-law. At 35, she had been part of the family for 15 years, long enough to establish herself as the unofficial matriarch below our mother-in-law. "We cannot allow this situation to continue. Father-in-law's favoritism toward Yukiko threatens the natural order of our household." My breath caught in my throat. I remained perfectly still, knowing that discovery would bring shame not only upon me but upon the entire family structure. Eavesdropping was considered one of the gravest breaches of proper behavior, yet something compelled me to listen, some instinct for self-preservation that had been honed through 3 years of navigating the subtle currents of family politics. "I agree completely," Mariko replied, her voice softer but no less determined. As the middle daughter-in-law, she had always sought to align herself with Sachiko's authority, perhaps hoping to secure her own position through careful alliance building. Yesterday, when father-in-law asked for her opinion on the new trade agreements with the Dutch merchants in Nagasaki, I saw mother-in-law's face. Such consultation with the youngest daughter-in-law is unprecedented. Through the gaps in the azalea branches, I could see their silhouettes against the morning light. They wore their most formal kimono, indicating that this conversation was part of a larger plan, a formal conspiracy that had been carefully orchestrated. Sachiko's kimono bore the family mon embroidered in gold thread, while Mariko's featured the subtle patterns that indicated her secondary status within the household hierarchy. "The merchants' wives have begun to notice," Sachiko continued, her voice taking on the measured tone she used when discussing matters of utmost gravity. "At the tea ceremony last week, Tanaka-san's wife made particular note of how frequently father-in-law seeks Yukiko's counsel on matters that traditionally fall within the elder women's domain. If word spreads to other domains, our family's reputation for proper order could be seriously damaged." The implications of their words struck me like lightning illuminating a darkened sky. In the rigid social structure of Edo period Japan, hierarchy was not merely tradition. It was the foundation upon which all relationships, all stability, all honor rested. For me to receive attention that should rightfully flow through Sachiko first, then Mariko, was indeed a breach of natural order that could bring disgrace upon our entire house. But what they spoke of was not my doing. Since marrying into the family 3 years earlier, I had been scrupulously careful to observe every protocol, to defer to my elders in all matters, to speak only when spoken to and to offer opinions only when directly requested. If our father-in-law, Matsudaira Yoshimune, had begun consulting me more frequently, it was surely because of circumstances beyond my control. "What do you propose?" Mariko asked, and I could hear the anticipation in her voice, the excitement of someone about to participate in a carefully planned campaign. Sachiko's response chilled my blood. We must create a situation that will force father-in-law to recognize the disruption that Yukiko's presence causes to proper household management. The spring festival approaches, and with it, the opportunity to demonstrate to the entire community that allowing the youngest daughter-in-law to exceed her proper station brings chaos to the most fundamental ceremonies. The spring festival. My heart began to race as I realized the significance of her words. The annual celebration was not merely a community gathering. It was the primary opportunity for samurai families to display their adherence to proper form, their mastery of cultural traditions, and their worthiness to serve the shogunate. Every detail would be scrutinized by families from across the domain, every mistake noted and discussed for months. Afterward, the flower arrangement competition, Mariko said with sudden understanding. You intend to sabotage her entry. Not sabotage, Sachiko corrected with the precision of someone who had thought through every detail. We will simply ensure that she is given responsibilities that exceed her capabilities. When she fails publicly, father-in-law will be forced to recognize that his unusual favoritism has created unrealistic expectations. The shame of failure will naturally restore the proper order. I felt the morning air grow cold despite the warm spring sunshine. Flower arrangement, ikebana, was not merely an artistic pursuit but a spiritual discipline that reflected one's inner harmony and understanding of natural balance. To fail publicly at ikebana would suggest a fundamental flaw in character, a lack of the refinement necessary for membership in a respected samurai family. How do you intend to accomplish this? Mariko pressed, and I could visualize her leaning forward eagerly, hungry for the details of their conspiracy. Mother-in-law has already agreed to request that Yukiko prepare the primary display for the tokonoma in the main reception hall, Sachiko explained, referring to the alcove where the most important artistic arrangement would be displayed for all visitors to see. But what mother-in-law doesn't know is that we have arranged for the traditional materials to be unavailable. The flower merchant who usually supplies our cherry branches and spring peonies has been convinced to delay his delivery until after the competition deadline. The cruelty of their plan took my breath away. The tokonoma arrangement was typically prepared by the eldest daughter-in-law, using materials that had been ordered weeks in advance and selected with extraordinary care. To be assigned this honor was either a sign of great trust or, as I now realized, a trap designed to ensure my failure. Without the proper materials, Mariko said with obvious satisfaction, she'll be forced to improvise with whatever she can find in the gardens. No matter how skilled she might be, she cannot create a display worthy of the main tokonoma using only common garden flowers and branches. Exactly, Sachiko confirmed. And when the judges see her inadequate arrangement alongside the carefully prepared displays from other families, the shame will reflect not only on her but on father-in-law's judgment in elevating her beyond her proper station. The natural order will be restored, and we can return to the harmonious household management that has served our family for generations. I remained frozen beside the pond, my mind racing to process the full implications of what I had heard. This was not merely a personal attack. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign to reshape the entire power structure of our household. They were using the most sacred traditions of our culture as weapons, turning ceremonies that should bind us together into instruments of division and shame. The sound of footsteps on the stone path warned me that their conversation was ending. I slipped deeper into the shadows behind the ornamental rocks, my heart pounding as I watched them emerge from behind the azalea bushes, their faces composed in expressions of serene innocence. They walked toward the main house with a measured gait appropriate to their station, their elaborate hairstyles adorned with seasonal ornaments that caught the morning light like jeweled crowns. After they disappeared from view, I remained crouched beside the pond for long minutes, trying to steady my breathing and organize my thoughts. The koi continued their lazy swimming, indifferent to the human crisis that had just unfolded above their small world. A gentle breeze stirred the cherry blossoms, sending another shower of pink petals into the water where they floated like tiny boats carrying away the innocence of my morning routine. The magnitude of my situation began to crystallize in my mind. I was caught in a web of family politics that extended far beyond personal relationships. In the hierarchical society of Edo, Japan, challenging the established order, even unintentionally, was considered a serious transgression. If Sachiko and Mariko succeeded in their plan, the shame would indeed fall upon me, but it would also reflect upon my birth family, potentially damaging their reputation and future marriage prospects for my younger sisters. Yet what could I do? To confront them directly would require me to admit that I had been eavesdropping, which would bring its own disgrace. To appeal to our mother-in-law would violate the chain of command and suggest that I considered myself worthy of bypassing my elder sisters-in-law. To speak with our father-in-law would be even more inappropriate, as it would place him in the impossible position of having to choose sides in a household dispute. As I finally rose from my hiding place and returned to the main house to continue my morning duties, I began to understand that this crisis would require something more than adherence to traditional protocols. I would need to find a way to honor our family's principles while protecting myself from a conspiracy that threatened to destroy not only my position within the household but my reputation throughout the entire domain. The next few days passed in a strange state of heightened awareness. I continued my daily routines with scrupulous attention to proper form, but beneath the surface, I was developing a plan that would require all of my intelligence, cultural knowledge, and understanding of human nature. Every interaction with Sachiko and Mariko took on new significance as I searched for signs of their conspiracy's progress. 3 days after overhearing their conversation, mother-in-law summoned me to her private chambers. The room was arranged with a formal precision that characterized all aspects of our household. Tatami mats perfectly aligned, a single scroll painting depicting autumn maple leaves hanging in the tokonoma, and a low writing desk where mother-in-law composed the daily correspondence that maintained our family's network of social and business relationships. "Yukiko," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to unquestioned obedience, "I have decided to honor you with a special responsibility for the spring festival." Her words confirmed what I already knew, but I maintained an expression of surprised gratitude as she continued. "You will prepare the primary ikebana arrangement for the main reception hall. This is a significant honor, and I trust that you understand the importance of representing our family's aesthetic refinement to the entire community." I bowed deeply, my forehead touching the tatami mat in the gesture of ultimate respect. "I am deeply honored by your trust, mother-in-law," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my heart. "I will do everything in my power to create an arrangement worthy of our family's reputation." As I left her chambers, I caught a glimpse of Sachiko in the corridor. Her face carefully neutral but her eyes gleaming with what I now recognized as anticipation. The trap had been set, and she believed that my downfall was inevitable. That evening, I walked alone through the gardens, ostensibly performing the ritual inspection of plants and pathways that was part of my household duties, but actually beginning the careful reconnaissance that my survival plan would require. Our gardens were extensive, designed in the classical style that reflected the aesthetic principles developed over centuries of cultural refinement. There were formal areas with carefully maintained topiary and stone arrangements, naturalistic sections that mimicked wild mountain landscapes, and practical zones where vegetables and herbs were cultivated for household use. As I walked, I began to catalog every flowering plant, every interesting branch formation, every natural element that might be incorporated into an ikebana arrangement. Most importantly, I began to understand the deeper spiritual principles that govern the art form. The way that each arrangement was meant to capture not merely visual beauty but the essential harmony that connected all living things to the eternal cycles of nature. Over the following days, I began to frequent the Buddhist temple on the edge of our domain, ostensibly to pray for guidance in my upcoming responsibility, but actually to study the arrangements that the monks created for their ceremonies. These men had devoted their lives to understanding the spiritual dimensions of artistic expression, and their arrangements reflected a depth of insight that went far beyond mere technical skill. The head priest, an elderly man named Ryujin who had served the temple for over 40 years, noticed my frequent visits and my careful attention to the altar arrangements. One afternoon, as I knelt in meditation before the main Buddha statue, he approached with a quiet dignity that characterized his every movement. "Young lady," he said softly, I have noticed your devoted study of our humble arrangements. Are you perhaps preparing for the spring festival competition? I bowed respectfully before answering. Yes, honored father. I have been given the responsibility of creating the main display for my family, and I seek to understand the deeper principles that will allow me to honor our ancestors and our community. His weathered face creased into a gentle smile. The way of flowers is the way of impermanence, he said, settling onto a cushion beside me. The greatest arrangements are not those that display the most expensive materials or the most complex techniques, but those that capture a moment of natural truth so perfectly that observers are reminded of their connection to the eternal flow of existence. His words sparked something in my mind, the beginning of an understanding that would transform not only my approach to the competition but my entire perspective on the crisis I faced. We talked for nearly an hour about the philosophical foundations of Ikebana, the way that each arrangement was meant to reflect the season, the occasion, and the spiritual state of both creator and observer. As I walked home through the evening shadows, I began to formulate a plan that would turn my sisters-in-law's conspiracy against them while demonstrating the very principles of harmony and natural order that they claimed to defend. It would require precise timing, careful preparation, and a deep understanding of the cultural values that our community held most sacred. The week before the festival, events began to unfold exactly as Sachiko had predicted. The flower merchant who typically supplied our family sent word that unexpected storms had delayed the transport of cherry branches and spring peonies from his suppliers in distant provinces. The special bamboo containers that we had ordered for the arrangement were similarly delayed, leaving me with only the basic materials that could be found within our own gardens. I watched Sachiko receive this news with an expression of carefully controlled sympathy. "What a terrible misfortune," she said to mother-in-law, her voice heavy with false concern. "Perhaps it would be wiser to reassign the responsibility to someone with more experience in improvising under difficult circumstances." But mother-in-law, perhaps sensing that changing assignments so close to the festival would reflect poorly on the household's planning abilities, decided that I should proceed with whatever materials were available. "Yukiko has shown great dedication in her preparation," she said firmly. "I trust that she will find a way to honor our family despite these unfortunate circumstances." That evening, I began the final phase of my preparation. Working by moonlight in the most secluded section of our gardens, I gathered materials that my sisters-in-law could never have anticipated. Not the conventional flowers and branches that they had made unavailable, but elements that would allow me to create something unprecedented in our domain's festival history. From the bamboo grove at the edge of our property, I selected slender poles that had grown in naturally graceful curves, their surfaces marked by the unique patterns that only years of weathering could create. From the herb garden, I gathered sprigs of early spring plants whose subtle colors and delicate forms would complement rather than compete with the bamboo's natural elegance. Most importantly, from the pond where I had first overheard their conspiracy, I collected smooth stones and pieces of driftwood that had been shaped by water into forms of perfect natural balance. The night before the festival, I worked alone in the preparation room adjacent to the main reception hall, assembling my arrangement by the light of carefully positioned oil lamps. Each element was placed with meditation and precision, not according to the conventional rules that my sisters-in-law expected me to follow, but according to the deeper principles that the temple priest had helped me understand. The bamboo formed the structural foundation of the piece, its vertical lines suggesting strength and permanence, while its gentle curves spoke of flexibility and responsiveness to natural forces. The herbs and small flowering branches created layers of color and texture that drew the eye in a spiral movement around the central elements, while the stones and driftwood provided grounding points that connected the entire composition to the earth from which all life emerged. But the most important element of my arrangement was not visible. It was the intention with which each component had been selected and placed. This was not merely a display of technical skill or aesthetic sophistication, but a meditation on the harmony that emerges when apparent opposites are brought into balance. The natural materials spoke of wilderness and spontaneity, while their careful arrangement demonstrated discipline and cultural refinement. The simple components suggested humility and acceptance, while their innovative combination showed creativity and spiritual insight. As dawn approached and I completed my work, I understood that I had created something that transcended the competitive framework within which it would be judged. This arrangement was not merely my answer to Sachiko and Mariko's conspiracy. It was a statement about the values that truly mattered in our tradition, the way that authentic honor emerged not from adherence to rigid protocols but from the sincere attempt to embody the highest principles of our culture. The festival day dawned clear and bright, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of cherry blossoms throughout the domain. By mid-morning, families from across the region had gathered at our estate, their colorful kimonos and formal hakama creating a moving tapestry of social hierarchy and cultural pride. The judges for the Ikebana competition were 3 respected masters from the provincial capital, men whose expertise was acknowledged throughout the shogunate. As the competition began, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Sachiko and Mariko moved through the crowd with expressions of confident anticipation, certain that the trap they had laid would soon be sprung. Mother-in-law supervised the final preparations with her characteristic attention to detail, while father-in-law welcomed the distinguished visitors with a formal courtesy that maintained our family's reputation for proper hospitality. When the judges reached the main reception hall to examine the primary displays, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. This was the moment of greatest significance, when the artistic achievement of the host family would be measured against the highest standards of cultural refinement. The head judge, an elderly master whose family had served the imperial court for 8 generations, approached my arrangement with a measured pace that indicated serious evaluation. He studied the piece from multiple angles, his expression revealing nothing of his assessment, while the other judges and the gathered observers waited in respectful silence. After several long minutes, he turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying clearly through the reception hall. In 40 years of judging Ikebana competitions throughout the Kanto region, he said, I have rarely encountered an arrangement that so perfectly captures the essential spirit of our discipline. This work demonstrates not only technical mastery but spiritual insight of the highest order. He paused, allowing his words to settle over the assembled guests, before continuing. The artist has chosen to work with humble, natural materials in a way that reveals their hidden nobility. The composition speaks of strength without rigidity, beauty without ostentation, and harmony that emerges from the careful balance of opposing forces. This is Ikebana in its purest form, the manifestation of natural truth through artistic discipline. The crowd murmured its appreciation, and I felt the eyes of every person in the room turn toward me with expressions of surprise and respect. But more importantly, I saw the faces of my sisters-in-law transform from confident anticipation to shocked disbelief, and then to something approaching understanding. Father-in-law stepped forward to formally accept the judge's praise, his voice warm with pride as he acknowledged my achievement. My daughter-in-law Yukiko has honored not only our family but our entire domain with this remarkable work, he said. Her dedication to understanding the deepest principles of our cultural traditions reflects the values that we strive to embody in all aspects of our household management. As the formal ceremonies concluded and the guests began to circulate through the reception areas, I found myself surrounded by well-wishers and admirers, each eager to learn more about my approach to the art form. But the conversation that mattered most came later that evening, after the visitors had departed and our family had gathered for the private celebration that traditionally followed major festivals. Sachiko approached me as I stood on the veranda overlooking the gardens where their conspiracy had first been hatched. Her formal kimono had been replaced by a simple house robe, and her elaborate festival hairstyle had been loosened into a more comfortable arrangement. Most significantly, her expression had lost the calculating hardness that I had learned to recognize over the previous weeks. "Yukiko," she said quietly, "I must speak with you about something that has been troubling my heart." I turned to face her, maintaining the respectful posture appropriate to our relative positions within the family hierarchy. "I am at your service, elder sister," I replied, using the formal term that acknowledged her seniority. She was silent for a long moment, seemingly struggling to find the words for what she needed to say. Finally, she spoke with a directness that surprised me. "I have done you a grave injustice, and I must ask for your forgiveness. My actions over the past weeks were motivated not by concern for family harmony, as I told myself, but by jealousy and fear that my own position was being threatened. Her admission struck me with unexpected force. In our society, for an elder family member to acknowledge wrongdoing to a junior member was a gesture of extraordinary humility, one that risked her own status and reputation. "What I attempted to do to you was dishonorable," she continued, her voice growing stronger as she committed fully to her confession. "I allowed my personal insecurities to corrupt my judgment and to lead me into behavior that violated the very principles of family loyalty and mutual support that I claimed to be defending." I felt the tension that had dominated my thoughts for weeks begin to dissolve, replaced by something that I had not expected: compassion for the fears and uncertainties that had driven her actions. "Elder sister," I said softly, "your honesty honors me more than any festival prize could do. If I have seemed to exceed my proper place, it has never been from lack of respect for the wisdom and experience that you and Mariko bring to our family." We stood together in comfortable silence, looking out over the gardens where cherry petals continued to fall like gentle snow, covering the paths and ponds with a carpet of pink and white. The conspiracy that had threatened to destroy our family harmony had been transformed into an opportunity for deeper understanding and mutual respect. Over the following days, the changes in our household dynamics became apparent to everyone. Sachiko began to include me in planning discussions that had previously been limited to the elder daughters-in-law, while Mariko showed new interest in learning about the philosophical approaches to traditional arts that I had studied at the temple. Most importantly, mother-in-law began to recognize that the knowledge and perspectives that each of us brought to the family could be sources of strength rather than competition. The incident taught me something crucial about the nature of honor in our society. True honor, I realized, did not come from rigid adherence to hierarchical protocols or from the accumulation of formal recognition and praise. Instead, it emerged from the sincere attempt to embody the highest values of our culture: compassion, wisdom, artistic excellence, and the kind of inner strength that could transform conflict into opportunities for growth and understanding. Father-in-law's favoritism, which had seemed so threatening to my sisters-in-law, was revealed to be not preference for my person but appreciation for the dedication with which I approached my responsibilities and my willingness to seek understanding of the deeper principles that guided our traditions. When they began to approach their own duties with similar dedication, they found that his respect and consultation expanded to include them as well. The Spring Festival became a turning point not only in my personal relationships within the family but in my understanding of what it meant to be a woman of honor in Edo period Japan. The social constraints that had seemed so restrictive began to reveal themselves as frameworks within which creativity, intelligence, and spiritual growth could flourish, provided that one approached them with the right attitude and sufficient preparation. Years later, when I had become the elder daughter-in-law and was faced with the challenge of integrating newer family members into our household, I remembered the lessons of that spring festival. The principles of harmony and natural order that governed our society were not rigid rules designed to suppress individual potential, but flexible guidelines that could accommodate growth, change, and the unique contributions that each person brought to our collective life. The cherry blossoms that had witnessed the beginning of the conspiracy continued to bloom each spring, their brief but intense beauty serving as an annual reminder that the most precious moments of life often emerge from the careful balance of opposing forces: strength and gentleness, tradition and innovation, individual achievement and collective harmony. The garden where I had first overheard the whispered plans against me became the place where I taught my own daughters-in-law about the deeper principles of Ikebana, passing on not only the technical skills but the spiritual insights that transformed artistic practice into a path of personal and cultural understanding. The story of that spring festival spread throughout our domain and beyond, becoming part of the local folklore that helped preserve the memory of how our ancestors navigated the complex challenges of maintaining honor and dignity in a rapidly changing world. But for our family, it remained a private triumph. The moment when potential disaster was transformed into deeper wisdom, when conspiracy became cooperation, and when the delicate balance of household harmony was restored through the careful application of the very principles that our culture held most sacred. In the end, the plan that my sisters-in-law had made against me had indeed nearly destroyed something precious. Not my honor as they had intended, but the harmony and mutual trust that made our family a source of strength rather than division. Yet by working through the crisis with honesty, creativity, and respect for our shared values, we had not only preserved that harmony but deepened it, creating bonds of understanding that would serve us well through all the challenges and changes that the future would bring. The whispered conspiracy in the cherry blossom garden had become, through the alchemy of forgiveness and mutual respect, a story of renewal and growth that honored both our individual potential and our collective commitment to the principles that made life in Edo, Japan not merely sustainable but genuinely meaningful and